Hello and welcome to Additive Insight, the original additive manufacturing industry podcast brought to you by the TCT magazine team. I'm TCT Head of Content Laura Griffiths, and on this episode we sit down with Thomas Batigne, co-founder and President of Lynxter, to mark a decade of pioneering silicone 3D printing. From taking big risks to building machines used in hospitals, aerospace and beyond, Thomas reflects on the journey, the challenges, and shares what's coming next, including a new development that will allow productivity to skyrocket. If you like what you hear, make sure to click subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And for more Additive Insight, head over to tctmagazine.com to become a TCT executive member and receive our global print magazine delivered straight to your door 4 times a year, exclusive monthly deep dives, industry vertical newsletters, VIP access to events, and much more. So hello, Thomas. Thank you so much for joining us on the Additive Insight podcast today. How are you doing?
Hey, Laura. Great. Feeling great about this 10 years anniversary already.
Yeah, it's very, very exciting. You and I were just chatting a little bit before we started recording, and I said, I can't believe it has been 10 years already.
Yeah, I mean, me neither. It went so fast. That's great. And so much stuff happened in this industry, in this company. So yeah, good to take a moment to look back on all of that.
Yeah, and that is really what we're interested in doing today. But Thomas, we do start every episode of the Additive Insight podcast with the same question, which is, what was your sort of light bulb moment with 3D printing technology? Do you remember the first time you ever saw it, or the first time you thought, oh, that's really cool, I want to get into that?
Oh, well, it will sound a bit like a joke maybe, but that was back in 2012 or 13, after my first class of CNC machining in my engineering school. I was like, hey, instead of just removing chips of metal on the part, we could add some, right? I've never heard about 3D printing, and I was having these thoughts, and I was like, oh, that's crazy. That might be big and everything. And at the next day at my parents' house, I remember there was a footage on TV on 3D printing guns. And well, I'm not so much into guns. I saw plenty of machines that were doing exactly what I had in mind. So I was half excited, half disappointed, because basically the idea I had was already live for 30 years and I was not even aware of it. But it allowed me to find the RepRap project and start building my own machine in very dark forums and getting connected with people in the Netherlands and in England to make my first machine. Yeah, that's how it started for me.
I love the idea that, Thomas, for just a brief moment you thought, I may have invented 3D printing here.
Yeah, but no. I designed here, and that's what we say all the time. It's not because we have no idea that is necessarily great to do or that's going to be taken. That's okay.
Mhm.
It's about doing it, and I think that's the whole point with the company
Yeah.
building and everything.
And I think it's great that it came from the RepRap project. Obviously, we've seen really exciting technologies come out of this. But really, take me back to, as I say, 10 years of Lynxter this year. Take me back to when you were first thinking about, experiment with this technology. How did it sort of start and then transition into the idea of, okay, we could do something with this?
Yeah, so with my first RepRap printer, I quickly got access to the medical field, and I've designed and printed medical devices for research, for diabetic research, specifically for patients to scare over better. So that's basically how it started, and then got in touch with a couple of friends, and they were more into industrial machinery. And together we were like, okay, let's maybe build a bigger machine, and that's really how it started. Well, I make the story short, but eventually we got spotted by Airbus during an entrepreneurship contest that we were doing for a a trip to Canada. That was the price, but eventually got cancelled. So there was a trip to Paris. But because of Airbus spotting us, we decided to stay in the contest and eventually win it and start the company. That really was a one-off opportunity initially for us, and just that along the way we started to dispense liquid material, and that was the sort of specialty that we were looking for to exist in this very fragmented market. So yeah, that's how it started.
So what demand were you seeing at the time? And then what sort of gap did you notice that just wasn't being covered in the market already?
Honestly, back then, it must have been 16 or 17. It was just a technological push. We were engineers, loved to make 3D printers, and the idea of dispensing liquid material instead of a plastic filament or pellet or metal or whatever, that was exciting because that was new and exciting. And whenever you touch a first silicon part, you're like, oh, that cannot be 3D printed, impossible. So it was really a technological push. And then it was a logical push because we had in mind, and this is linked to previous work I've done for Airbus subcontractor in Hamburg, where I was in charge of implementing additive manufacturing for the aerospace, and basically having to sort every processes and material and application within a big 3D tab. And there was a block missing in all of this context. And this block was technical elastomers made out of additive manufacturing. Um, and so we were like, okay, techno push, we have that. And there is something missing in the big grid of possibilities with AM. What about doing it? And so it was not a market pool, which is super risky. I mean, now 10 years in, I can tell this is a super risky move that we've done. But eventually that paid off because basically like no demand because no one knows it exists. Uh, and it allowed us to do all of the R&D very early on and be in advance regarding competition. So yeah, that's how it started. Then pushing the technology, we had very easy application to start with. It was, I remember, I think the first one was a sort of as a strap, like an elastic strap for a camera that was used in a surgical environment. So it had to be silicone and it had to be sterilizable, very strong and everything. So that's what we started with, and then I mean that's how we built the thing along the way with customers and applications.
Can you remember sort of what was that like at the start, sort of the early experiments? How challenging was it to get this all to click to begin with? Because it isn't an easy thing to do.
Well, I've got a funny one here. The first time we showed the technology at 3D Print Lyon would have been a scam because basically the liquid 3D printing tool head was in the machine in the S600D behind me.
Mhm.
But at this stage, we've never printed silicone. Like I've never touched silicone with my hands, and we were showing parts to see if that would eventually click with the market. And then we met big guys from the silicon industry, and they were like, "No way you can do that. It is not possible. I mean, you don't really realize what's going to happen with your technology, blah blah blah." And we had no idea about the silicon market. And when we came back home from Lyon, I went to the hardware store and I went and buy a silicon cartridge. I was like, okay, now I know that if I can 3D print that stuff, eventually that can, sustain the company.
Mhm.
And that's exactly how it happened. And so that was like a lot of hours in trial and errors, starting from scratch with mechanical background, trying to figure out the chemistry of that stuff that just seems so far away. But eventually we cracked it enough for getting in touch with the right people in the silicon industry, specifically like Chimie, company based in France, who was doing exactly the same, basically trying to crack silicon 3D printing, but from a chemistry point of view, whereas we had the mechanical point of view. And so we decided to start working together, which dramatically accelerated the project, and we had something working, so we could sell it and start really looking at customer application and see what people would do with that.
Mhm. So, what is so challenging about printing with silicone?
Well, silicon flows. Silicon is viscous. Silicon take ages to cure. It's a complete change of paradigm compared to thermoplastic. Thermoplastic, you heat it up, melts, so you can put it where you want, and then you cool it down. And there is a big delta already between 300 degrees in the nozzle and 20 degrees in the room. So that cools quickly. You can go even quicker by adding flow, blowing on it basically. And you cannot do that with silicone. What you can do is heat it up so it cures faster, part A and part B, but then everything clogs, not good. And you can also take single component silicone. So this one cures with the moisture in the air, but you cannot really bring more moisture inside the silicone. So this is eventually slow. And if you try to speed it up, layers end up not bonding properly, like you can have with thermoplastic. And we need full bonding between the parts in order to tackle critical applications. So that's the whole thing that we faced. And we've been developing a lot of chemistry, a lot of tool heads and accessories to make that possible. And that is today one of the most valuable know-how that we have and we jealously keep.
And so you've got some machines behind you there. It's 10 years, you're celebrating this anniversary. Talk to me just about getting to this stage.
Well, first, I think it takes a lot of time and people creativity to figure out how to bundle all of that together and make that work, specifically like in France, in European industrial context and everything. So a lot of effort. Also being agile enough to swap from a product to another in order to tackle the right need and be very close to the customers. So we started with the S600D here after our first prototypes. And the idea behind it was, okay, we sometimes we need parts right away. And when you say that, you can say that for any kind of part, any kind of material. So we're like, okay, we'll make the machine that is capable of printing any part with any material right at the place of need. And which is an extremely complex project to tackle because you need to master all of the material, make sure that you can print all of them. So develop the technologies that go with it. And then all of that has to fit into one single machine. So everything has to be cross-compatible. That is a heck of a complex project, but that's what we've done with the S600D until we realized that the solution remains limited and every part cannot be made, which is obvious when you think about it. So we were like, okay, let's try reposition this machine towards people who want to discover new materials and use the technology that we've developed to come up with new product, more dedicated product. And we realized that some of the customers we had actually with the S600D were buying the machine only for the silicon printhead. So we looked at current limitation and be like, okay, if we make a printer that's printing silicone, what limits shall we remove? And one of them was the geometrical limits, because silicon collapses, and a bit like with thermoplastic, when you have overhangs that are too steep falls. The thing is, compared to thermoplastic, you cannot really put printed supports under it because the way we operate the silicon makes it fully isotropic. So you cannot unclick the layer, you cannot break the layer. So that fuses, that cross links together. So we had to introduce a second material as a support, and so a second tool head, and so build a machine around this concept of having two tool heads. And so we decided to go for Cartesian builds with like two independent extruders, IDET, BCN 3D. So we could have more dedicated products to leverage the technology that we've developed with the X600D. And this move really worked because it accelerated the company completely. The year we released the first S300X, we ended up with 140% growth, which is tremendous and needs to be managed. It's really good. And since then, we have a stable double-digit growth every year thanks to this move. And well, the other versions of the S300X that are already on the market and coming. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about the machines that are already on the market then, because you have users in so many sort of vast industries. And I know that this started out with a medical project to begin with, but you've also mentioned in the early days having backing from these big industrial companies that are very interested in this technology. So can you talk to me about the sort of applications that this is being really well suited to, and also maybe application areas that it's kind of opened up for 3D printing that maybe weren't really possible before?
We have 3 layers of applications. Basic is prototyping, goes everywhere, very versatile, and unlocks a lot of situation. Second layer is tooling, everything that is super useful for the industry, whether it's healthcare or automotive, whatever, but basically a tool. And finally, you have product. The goal is to have the technology suitable for a specific product, so it's very verticalized, and we can retain a lot of value. But instead of starting with the product or starting with super critical application, we start with low critical application, not because the machine cannot handle it, but because the go-to market is way easier. So that's the way we do, knowing that the technology eventually is compatible with supercritical application. Whereas in this AM field, not a lot of technologies and material are actually potentially capable at supercritical application. So yeah, that sustains the growth of the company, makes us stable, and so we can climb up the application ladder this way. Um, Application cases ranges from very, I said, very simple prototype, like a gasket prototype. I don't know, I've got one here, just very simple gasket prototype, um, to very useful but trivial application such as masks for the surface treatment industry. So when you treat the surface of a part, whether you paint it or I don't know, you add ceramic to it to make it harder and then stronger, you need to mask some areas because you don't want to coat these ones. Like you wouldn't want to coat, for example, a thread because that makes it non-functional. So instead of using tape, what they do right now, and specifically in the aerospace, you can just like 3D print sort of a cap and plug and use that instead. It goes faster. It is cleaner, less risk of scratching the parts. It doesn't require super technical and know-how, and it's not a tedious task to do. And finally, the tool itself is reusable, which is a game changer for that surface treatment industry. So this kind of very niche application are very important to find and then master, because the guys in this industry might never have used a 3D printer.
Yeah.
And then we want them to start with a silicone printer because that's the only one that's capable of withstanding heat and the hard chemical environments that the plant will face. Anyway, so yeah, this kind of application, and then more long-term application are implants, silicone implants, or very critical. Or I mentioned the gaskets, but that can be very critical gasket for I don't know, very warm kerosene in the aerospace. Yeah, prosthesis for amputees. All of these fields, silicone is used. Breast external and internal prosthesis as well.
Yeah, I had a really nice conversation with Dr. Cristina Boris from the Clinic de Barcelona, talking about using this technology to create some customized masks for babies in neonatal care units. And when you hear things like that, it just makes you go, oh, that's what this technology is really good at. That's what it's for. Customization, like you say, being able to work with these materials that's the only material you can use for this sort of thing. And it was just such a nice use case. Do you have any like that where you've been really proud to work on anything that's is maybe like a favorite application story for you?
That's every day. We have an application center in order to foster all of this. That's really every day. I don't know. The one that took me time, energy, and I feel rewarded is, for example, like printing these visors during COVID. It's generic for the IM, but I was like sleeping in the lab alone for 1 month, running
Wow.
all of the printers, printing 25,000 and giving that away. There was people were queuing in front of the workshop to get that. We had nurses crying and everything. That was beautiful. I mean, I was dead after that, but that was really, really good. Another more funny one is the collaboration with Inconnu designer Laura De Velde on handbags, ended up on Netflix
I
twice.
saw.
So that's yeah. There are so many stories like this. I fixed the coffee machine of a soldier after a mission during additive manufacturing village during organized by the European Defense Agency, and it was super happy. Every part is a story, and I think that's why we do this job and why all of this complexity is worth it.
Absolutely. I mean, just that is such a clear snapshot of all the ways that this can have an impact. Completely diverse industries there. So, what are you working on right now? It's obviously very established in these different sectors. You've talked about the technology and how that has grown. I don't mean to be that person to go, come on, tell us what's next, but is there something else that you're working on right now from a hardware point of view or maybe an application area point of view that you're trying to get into?
Well, we have a big roadmap, right? But there is something that touches every single industrial AM player today, is how this machine should become a convenience item. And I think Bamboo Labs showed that very well by basically innovating a bit on the hardware side, but mostly providing the right UX. And it generates the third wave of AM, and that's really good. So now everyone needs to be up to speed, and market's going to be very selective on that in that regard. That's why we invest on software for years because this matches our vision. And it's not because it's a specific technology that it has to be specifically complex to operate on the contrary. So a lot of work is going on this direction, meaning that basically a lot of software, a lot of sensors, a lot of electronic integration in every single part of the machine. We've been selected by the French state for such innovation work with the France 2030 initiative. So they help us in being able to put these critical R&D hours for improving our product.
Right.
Recently, we've got granted some new IP that allow us to pass this sort of glass roof that you have this with this technology. Even if when you play with the chemistry and printing strategy and all of that, you roughly have, I don't know, 12, 15 hours of printing autonomy, even if you put big cartridge. And so we found a way to make that, for now, 5 times bigger.
Oh, wow.
So basically, productivity skyrockets. It's possible now to print high resolution and everything. So we'd like to showcase that at Fall Next. We'll be on time, but it's running in our lab already, and we already print part of the service for technological validation for customers. Yeah, and regarding application, as said, everything goes up sequentially. So we have like new important partnerships in the healthcare industry with different hospitals, one of them being APHP, which is the biggest hospital group in Europe, based in Paris. And so many applications comes out of it, and we are pretty confident that will go up in criticity pretty soon. Fresh release from last week was our Seal 4, which is an FDA approved silicone for FDA compliant silicone for foot contact. So now we can be faster in releasing more material with more criticity. I think that's what I can say.
And in the time that Lynxter has been around, this industry has kind of gone up and down, the additive industry, and it has been a challenging few years. Anyone you talk to, it's like, oh, how have you navigated the challenges? But from the outside looking in, it seems like Lynxter has just carried on kind of innovating quietly and just getting on with it. So I guess I just wanted to ask, how have you navigated the last few years? Have you just really stayed focused and kind of stayed away from all the M&A sagas and all that kind of stuff that's been going on in the industry? Talk to me about how that's been for you and how you've navigated that.
We've always considered all of this to be a tool, and our job is to provide a solution to a problem. That's all. We could make microwaves, doesn't matter. And so we see ourselves on the long run. So every time there is something that's overhyped, we're like, sounds weird. It doesn't add up on the long run. This valuation can't survive and investors won't get their money back. So all of that's going to get bankrupt. I mean, we saw that coming. That was pretty obvious. And we were right most of the time. So I think we'll keep doing that. Also, adapting. When we realized that the S600D was not a machine for the big markets and just specific markets, we were like, okay, well, we won't be able to sustain the needs of the company for, I don't know, at that stage, I was maybe like 15 people. So we're like, that won't work. So we need to adapt. And that's difficult to start everything from scratch again, because you've got all of this time and invested already, time and resources. So yeah, I think that's the survival key, and trying to plan and replan all the time on cash wise. And that's how other companies got bankrupt. You end up with a company that consumes too much cash every month. And we've been through very low phases, but eventually we always got out of it thanks to cash management and trying to remain relevant and not too big. A humble development, I'd say. Yeah.
And so let's look ahead then. You say it's all about planning, and you're obviously thinking about the next step in terms of hardware. What do you think the next 10 years looks like for Lynxter, and what do you kind of hope it will look like in another decade's time?
I think, and again, touching on bamboo, it's great because even more people got on board. So now AM is convenient. It's everywhere. And that's great because now it's easier to specify a specific need or ask for a specific material because you know that it can exist at least. Back then, it was not. We've been doing trade shows for 10 years. And I don't know how many times I saw someone checking the printer, being completely hypnotized by it, telling me that it was the first time they could see a printer. That's great emotion, but it means that this person is not thinking at all it's possible. So it cannot think about solving whatever issue he has with the technology, right? I still have that today. But what I see is these numbers are going lower. And so I guess the evangelization, if that's the word, has gone a long way already. And so now the market is a bit more ready. So I think that's going to be easier in the future for that. What I see as well is that everything that we've built is now more connected, more reliable, more convenient. And that's why we decided to get closer to the final product application. And by doing that, we realized that sometimes Lynxter as a brand is not the right company to do that. And it's better to undertake specific application and package application solutions with a Lynxter printer, but for a specific market and with a specific piece of software, specific expertise without the Lynxter brand. That's what we've done with MB Therapeutics, for example. And today we have A to Z solution for hospitals to microdose and 3D print drugs on site, qualified. This is something that we would not have been able to do alone, but doing that with MB, being super verticalized, definitely helps and make it happen. So I think that's what's going to be our future. Lynxter as an OEM for the versatile technology as a machine maker. But then when it comes to hyper verticalized solution, I think we'll keep teaming up white label and make sure that the technology is used. Because I'm always a bit sad when I see something that we solved today, because finally all of the planets line up. But that's something that we could have done 10 years ago already. I mean, we had the tech. So I'd like all of that to go faster. And I think that's what's gonna happen in the upcoming years. And yeah, in 10 years I hope to be in the picture still.